Good afternoon. Welcome to MediaScope's live Friday afternoon chat. I'm thrilled to be joined this afternoon by Todd Wheatland from King Content and Bobbi Mahlab from Mahlab Media. Hello, Todd. Todd from Perth, just telling us he's joining from there. This afternoon we're going to be talking specifically about content marketing with two of the most experienced people in that sector of our industry. Many of you may have noticed that this morning through MediaScope's newsletter, I launched a new content marketing MediaScape. Thank you, Todd, to you and your team for running your eye over that before it went live. And indeed, I have had quite a few, much feedback since the launch this morning. So those changes and that feedback will be applied to that MediaScape, as it is with all of the other 21 MediaScapes. A quick thank you to my very good friends at UnLtd today, who supplied my quite large, I'm back, good, my UnLtd t-shirt. UnLtd, of course, our industry charity. They particularly support charities involved with disadvantaged youth, and I encourage everyone to go to that website to see how you can help, unlimited.org.au, or there's some banners currently live on the MediaScope site as well. So first of all, let's welcome Todd and Bobbi. Todd Wheatland, your role at King Content, you are the Global Strategy Director, or Global Head of Strategy, is that correct?
Look, it's something like that. We change it every few weeks just to keep us on our toes. But yeah, strategy, something to do with strategy is good.
Excellent. And you're in Perth this afternoon over there for...
I am actually in my childhood home right now. So I'm having a little trip down memory lane. It's now a museum, of course. Just landed actually. So we'll have kicked everyone out of this home and have taken over, but I'll be more sociable shortly. But here for a combination of social and work.
Very good. Well, enjoy your weekend. Bobbi, you're coming from us from Mahlab HQ this afternoon?
Yes, I'm in Sydney this week.
Oh, very good. Oh, yes. Well, last week you were in Bhutan, I believe.
Yes.
Really? Wow.
There's not a lot of content marketing happening in Bhutan yet, let me tell you.
It's good to beat the brushes, isn't it?
That's right. They're way too high in the Himalayas to be into this stuff.
Actually, Bobbi, I think I did read a comment that you made on social media, or maybe it was published this week, where you did talk about people in Bhutan were reading their prayers through their mobile phone.
Yeah, it was extraordinary. I mean, smartphones are really revolutionising the third world. And, there were two Buddhist temples I was in where people were reading their prayers on their smartphones. So just goes to show how pervasive technology has become.
Very fascinating. That is really interesting. So look, let's begin. As I mentioned this morning, I launched a new content marketing MediaScape. So I thought it might be an opportunity to have a chat about that landscape. There's certainly, as Bobbi and I were there was certainly a lot of talk about content marketing, native advertising, branded content at the Publish conference on Wednesday. I suppose the first question that I have for both of you, and indeed this was highlighted through an article on Ad News yesterday, there does seem to be some confusion in the market about exactly how we should be defining this space. So content marketing, brand storytelling, branded content, native advertising, advertorial. How does it all fit in? Why is there this confusion in the market? And are there differences between all of these terms and references, or is it really the same thing? Todd, if we can go to you first.
Look, I really have a problem with definitions at the best of times. So I had a smile earlier when you were talking about putting the landscape out, because I can only imagine you get criticism about that rather than, you get a lot of people on day one going, you've missed out this is a problem, this is not how I see it, because everyone has their own viewpoint, obviously, on anything that you would consider a landscape. What I find is I literally cannot even listen to a lot of the conversations about, is it this or is it that or is that this? I mean, the fact is we're trying to solve business problems in the end. We happen to be a content marketing agency because that's the marketing type that works now. That's the way the world does function. Content, this is the era, or the modern era of content. But if airship advertising works, then we'd be an airship advertising company. We're doing something because it's what works, and that is why we've aggregated in this direction. And the blurring of the lines, I think, comes from people who tended to be very specialised, or come from this is the type of agency I am, and this is the way the business model works, and this is the sort of services I deliver. And as you can see, the way companies are operating now, they're really not inclined to buy that sort of thinking. People, integrated marketing is what CMOs need, and they need smart people who can look above the tactics to actually help them drive a strategy to action. And that's where, that's what we try to do. And we call it content marketing because content marketing is a very big part of what that mix represents.
And does that still encompasses some of the other terms that we described? So your content marketing, you've got the tick box there. Bobbi, why do you think this confusion has come up in the market, and how do you define what you offer?
Yeah, look, I very much like Todd's answer, and I think that in any new or emerging disciplines, there's always a fight over language. And I think that jargon is often used to make things more complicated than things really are. And, we have a really sort of clear view on it, which is what content marketing is fundamentally using content in your marketing for marketing purposes in its very broadest way. And that's to affect behaviours and get outcomes for the businesses that you're working with. So it's using content and the processes around that for the outcomes that you want for that business. And it's really using content for marketing outcomes and to affect behaviour. That's in its broadest sense what it is. And I think, there is a lot of blurring and definitions, what's branded content, what's content marketing, what's all these sorts of things. But I think what I've just said is really what it boils down to.
I think that's true. I mean, the digital sector of our broader industry, of course, has done a great job in making the programmatic and the automated sector quite confusing, where really it doesn't need to be. It's as simple as connecting a buyer with a seller.
Yeah.
So I think that's a very, both made very good points there. How do you see content marketing, and that's what we will call it. How do you see content marketing as part of our broader marketing mix? I mean, there is just so much choice now for a marketer. How do you see it fit into the broader landscape, and what position do you think it has? Bobbi, we'll go to you first.
Yeah, I think in most but not all situations it's absolutely required. I mean, if you consider the fact that I think it's 60 to 70% of purchase decisions or actions are a result of research done online first. That's the role that one of the key roles that content marketing does. It informs that journey for the way people are going to make decisions. So to me, it's imperative for organisations of any type, big brands, startups, whatever, to use content to be explaining themselves, telling their stories, and engaging with customers. It's just a given.
Just a given. Todd, how do you see content marketing fitting into the many choices that marketers now have?
Yeah, I think in the end, it's such a cliche to say it's all about the story, right? But in the end, regardless of, and we've seen content marketing applied at every level. And Bobbi mentioned associations before, which, they do some great work in that sector as well as others. But any part of the marketplace, you see great content marketing work going on now. And at its essence, it's understanding an audience and understanding what you yourself represent, and working out, well, what possible value can you bring to that audience that actually has some longer term business impact. And that's how I see it in a nutshell. And what it means in this era of blurred lines is that you can't just look at that and think, well, great, there's the audience, here's the story, let's publish it. You really have to think, where are we going to put that story? How are we going to have people find it and discover it? What do we want them to do when they see and do that? And if they've done that once, how often do we need to do it again? And what is the next thing we want them to see? And how do we keep them motivated and ultimately trying to be interested in buying something from us, perhaps? So there's, it's not about lead generation per se. It's not about just lead nurturing. It's not about just brand awareness. It's about a holistic understanding of, there's an audience, you want to have some value to bring to that audience, and you can't just think in, it's very easy in the old era of siloed thinking, and every big company still has silos everywhere, and every agency environment still has silos everywhere. It's very easy to get confused, but the thing that works now is breaking those silos down. And I think content marketing has been a perfect wedge in a lot of organizations to actually break down those silos, both within their own marketing organization, but amongst their agency groups as well.
Yes, so an increasingly important part of that marketing mix. I think what you've both said leads quite sensibly on to the next point that I want to bring up, which is something that's spoken about a lot in the market. Hello, Dana, who's just joined us. Something that's spoken about a lot in the industry, which is the issue of transparency. So transparency in regard to the content that's being provided to an audience. Sean Cummins quite recently, I think at the radio conference, did bring this issue up. He didn't quite say the word trickery, but he certainly did, I suppose, speak about, being proud to be advertisers. And in some ways, content marketing may be hiding the true point of advertising, which is to sell product. Bobbi, how do you respond to that?
Yeah, not very positively, I've got to say, which probably isn't a surprise.
Controversy.
Not at all. I mean, I think that it's about really giving people things that are information that really helps them, right? And hopefully is a great experience too for them. And I think that the transparency issue is that, and I don't think that's changed from, traditional media of yesteryear. It's about declaring your interest. And I think that, studies have shown that if a brand is providing really good stuff to their to an audience that's really helping them in whatever it is that they need, or entertaining them, whatever the purpose is, that I don't think the consumer is going to think poorly of them because they say, hi, we're X brand and, we're behind this. But I think lack of disclosure is where it becomes really problematic, and best practice is best practice is when you disclose, right? So that to me is the line.
And Todd, yes, and I want to pick up on a point on that in a moment, Bobbi. Todd, what about the issue of transparency for you?
I think it's interesting we're using the word transparency, which is one we also use a lot, but less around the disclosure angle, but more about the authenticity of the type of communications that really resonates now. And I think, in this social media-led environment, then, the appearance of behind the scenes and being honest and being forthright and being, I think Blab's a great indicator of this. So, it's, here we are, and here in my Blair Witch finery, having trouble logging into this this call, right? It's very, we celebrate the amateur because we think, there's people like us. That just, that's nice. Let's relax. And I think that's that sort of use of the term transparency I can relate to very much in this environment. Transparency in terms of disclosure around, or the blurred line between editorial and advertising. I mean, it's a very loaded question. I think we were actually discussing this the other day, the publication Monocle, which you are probably familiar with, but I think it was one of the first when Tyler Brûlé first launched that publication, and he really came out and said, from day one, we're going to totally blur the lines between what an advertiser is to this product. We believe that people are ready, are intelligent, and they understand that if we are doing a 6-page feature on a particular company, then there's probably been some money changing hands here. We're not going to treat people like children.
Yeah.
And that was quite shocking at the time. But here, not too many years later, where that's really, we see every publisher in the world racing towards any way to monetize their native platforms. And every month there's huge innovations and changes and redirects in the publishing world. It's the fact is people need to make money with these things.
Todd, you're just fading out a little bit there. So we're missing that. Todd, you might need to log in a little. We have Sam, who's saying, with such a broad and difficult to define offering as content marketing can be, how do you both define deliverables, scope and objectives? Todd, you might need to come back in. Bobbi, wanted to pick up on something there in regard to, do you think audiences respond to content marketing that is transparent? Are they reading that as much as they're reading what they're regarding as editorial? Todd's just coming in now.
Yeah.
Again.
We're also finding in our business that when we run native, that the response and engagement on the platforms that we're running with native is incredibly high. So, so I think it's all very, very encouraging. And again, it comes back to the quality and relevance of what you're doing. But I see it as being, done the right way for the right audience at the right time is very, very effective. And I think a lot of content providers and publishers are sharing that experience.
And who do you think in the Australian market is doing content marketing well? Often when I see it being spoken about, and we're losing Todd, so I do apologise. Hopefully he'll try and come back in. Often when I see content marketing being spoken about, the only real one that's spoken about often is the orange is the new black.
Yeah, for native, yeah.
That's the one that seems to be, the benchmark that everyone kind of refers to in the market as, that was good work. Now, that was maybe a year ago now. Yeah. So surely there's been some other good examples. And is there anyone in the Australian market that's doing content marketing very well, apart from your good self, of course, Bobbi?
Yeah. Look, I think, there are quite a few people who are doing well. If you're talking Orange is the New Black was a good example of native. We've got an example in our own portfolio of native on our human resources HRM online platform, where we've created a piece of native for one of the advertisers with really, really good engagement figures. And I'm sure in the Australian context, we're not the only company getting those sorts of successes, and I'm sure Todd has many in his portfolio too. So I think a lot of us are well out of the starting gates around native. Fairfax, the whole brand Discover platform, a lot of people are playing in it. And it certainly is a major revenue stream for publishers. I think I read the other day that sponsored posts on LinkedIn account for, I can't remember, it's something like 40% of their revenue. So, the stakes are high, as Todd said earlier, everyone is looking for good revenue streams, and that at the moment is proving to be one.
It is proving to be one. And again, coming back to the Publish conference that you and I attended, Bobbi, it seemed to me that it was display advertising, so that normal advertising that we know. Data was another big one that was mentioned. Todd's just trying to come back in. Data, another mention. Events was a really big one that was mentioned, wasn't it? That was a really key revenue stream. And, of course, native content marketing was another key revenue stream that publishers are really adopting in a big way. Yeah. Maybe we can just touch on that, actually, Bobbi. How relevant as a revenue stream is it? And do you think it's a long-term revenue stream for publishers?
if we're talking specifically native, which is running content that looks like it belongs on that platform, yeah, I do think it's a long-term revenue stream for publishers. And one of the interesting things that comes up is that in newsrooms, who creates that content? Because one of the issues is there is a battleground between journalists creating content that they see for advertising, and it seems to me that it varies very much from workplace to workplace on what the setup is, and whether there are some organisations that have separate teams to create what I would call paid for content, and there are others that have their existing teams doing it, and there doesn't seem to be any one way or the other. It's people and publishers are finding deciding for themselves what works with their own teams.
That's exactly right, and I think there are some examples. I mean, Bauer Works got in touch with me today because I left them off the MediaScope, the content marketing MediaScope. Fairfax have just launched Fairfax Made.
Yes.
Mamma Mia Women's Network, a very Todd's trying to get back in again.
Yeah.
Mamma Mia Women's Network are very outspoken about the blurred line, or the lack of the blurred line between editorial and advertising for them.
Yes.
So I think that's a really great point, is that everyone does seem to be trying it in a different way. Jamie Kierkegaard is feeling bad for Todd. I'm sure Todd's okay. He is trying to get back in.
Come back.
Yeah, he's in Perth.
Yeah.
At his old, in his childhood house, apparently. I do apologise for Todd. He is trying to come back. Jamie Kirkwood is saying, "Come back, Todd." Todd's trying. He might join us again soon. Yeah. But Bobbi, just going back, it was really, every publisher seems to be doing it in their own way, and I think that's what's so interesting about the market now too. Is, you know, publishers, you've got to try everything.
Yeah, you do. I just wanted to, someone's posted as a message, but we have on our site 10 stellar international examples of native and award winners. So that's just a resource for anyone who wants to go there.
Oh, great. And I will link to that after as well. Todd's trying to come back in. I will link to that after as well on the page on the MediaScope. Thank you for that. It'd be great actually to build up a bit of a resource of it's back.
Welcome.
No one's more surprised than me.
Well, welcome, Todd. And perhaps, Todd, if I can go back to you. Oh, he's back. Huzzah. Someone has said. Todd, perhaps we can come back to you. And with Bobbi, I brought up, it'd be good to talk about some good examples in the Australian market of some content marketing. As I said to Bobbi, whenever it seems to be spoken about, and she picked me up and said it's native, sort of the benchmark seems to be the orange is the new black, which is often referred to, and that's maybe up to 12 months old. Is there something else that we should be now pointing to instead of orange is the new black?
Well, and they do a great job. Sorry, I am moving around a bit. They do a great job, don't they?
Making us seasick.
Whoa! It's like the modern formula, right? You have this. I can imagine these creative teams sitting down when they're planning a show and thinking, okay, how are we going to get this press hit? We've got to get our New York Times featurette running. So they'll get a team working on that as a parallel project to the actual TV show they're trying to develop.
Yes.
I think that's obviously a very sexy, very public consumption example. I think what I'm excited about is that there are so many examples from different industries, different spaces, different budgets, different ambitions that are basically employing the same toolkit, if you like, the same types of techniques, which are basically audience-centric storytelling, for want of a better, cliche. So I think, we've seen it, companies like organizations like Bupa, for example, have really embraced the internal change management required to shift a huge legacy of this is the way you market, and you market by telling stories about your company and its divisions and its products and services, and really invested the time and the resources to turn that ship around into something that is really focused on the audience. That I find exciting, coming from a marketing background myself, having sat in those silos and managed across, the complexities of the way things are and the way budgets are historically allocated. That's an amazing achievement, and that's the sort of thing that gets me excited. And we also see that at very small levels where organizations are, and typically it's easier for a challenger brand to do something different, right? But it's that a challenger brand doing something different in the space gets the traditional competitors in that space excited or threatened. And so you get, as soon as there's a first player in an industry really doing something nice and interesting, then I think it has these waves of impact. And, whether it's B2B or B2C or across the spectrum, we just see so many great examples now. I think it's that's the cool thing from my perspective.
Yeah, excellent. There's another aspect to that too, which is, the really great stuff that's happening in Australia that's leading globally. And, ANZ Blue Notes is a case study that's talked about a lot. But really on a global stage, they've really been heard everywhere, and it's terrific. It's terrific for Australia.
And ANZ Blue Notes, first of all, we've got a question from Sam McEwen. Thank you, Sam, for sending us your question. Any thoughts from both of you on services like Outbrain, asked Sam? Of course, we're a content distribution, monetization, amplification business. Israeli-based business too, I believe.
Yes, it is.
Lots of good businesses coming out of Israel.
Yeah, I mean, Outbrain provides a good service, as to Taboola, and there are other third-party distribution services out there. I think really, they are really valuable services, and they tie into the notion that life in content marketing, you're only part of the way there when you create the content. It's actually how you distribute, amplify, leverage. That really is where the conversation needs to shift. So. Yes. Services like Outbrain and Taboola, etc., are really important as part of the mix, and there are other things to consider there too. But as I said, the main point is that creating the content is just part of the way there.
That is such a good point, Bobbi. I mean, it's amplification, monetization for some, measurement. It's all of the marketing points that we all know. Todd. Todd, any comments from you? Great answer, said Sam. Thank you, Bobbi.
Yeah, I remember when Outbrain first started making inroads, then I remember someone referring to it as crack for blogs. And it's the concept of, and there's this term of, fire hose traffic, in the era when people really didn't know how to measure anything except through page views or, what's the size of that audience. And there's still a lot of organizations who do that or who think in that sort of basic way around ROI. But what I like about the space, and you're quite right, a lot of the ad tech space has been driven by these really interesting Israeli companies that originated in Israel. But I think the sophistication of the offering has changed, and we will see that continue to change. It'll be dramatically different in another 12 to 18 months. We're seeing new entrants like Plister coming in. The data sets that can be brought into those tools now, those content discovery platforms, that category is typically called, really, really interesting to bring. Sorry, I've just realised someone's about to walk through the door behind me, so I'm just recalibrating my answer and making it much shorter.
That's not a problem at all. We've gone a bit over time. If you're both happy to hang around a bit longer, I want to talk about your weeks and what's on your radar for the week ahead. Thank you to you both and for talking about content marketing. What I'll also do, Todd, please don't mind. Please don't worry.
That's okay. No, I'm just wandering into another room. Bear with me.
I will actually add onto the MediaScope site, I will add some links to some good examples of both Australian-based and overseas-based content marketing. Bobbi, thank you for sharing that resource. I'll make sure that goes up on the MediaScope site. If we can move on from content marketing a little bit now and perhaps talk about your media week. Bobbi, what's been on your radar this week?
Well, I think for us a highlight was the Publish conference and the Publish Awards. It was interesting to see the mix of people that were there, and the awards night was a great night for many Australian publishers, including us, in terms of acknowledgement. So that's been the highlight for us, I think, this week was the Publish Awards run by Umbrella.
And as you and I were speaking about before we actually started recording and went live, the interesting thing that I took out of it was the huge amount of conversation around digital and not so much on print.
Yes, that's right. And the question I think that Caroline Doherty from the Newsagents Federation asked was, what about if print goes? You Denise, you rephrased that. What was her exact question?
Now you're asking me to remember her exact question. Thank you, putting on the spot. She certainly did bring up, that she thought that print hadn't been mentioned much during the day. And obviously from the Newsagent Federation, that is certainly their main focus is print. Look, there's no doubt that the print magazine and newspapers is changing enormously. And we're seeing a lot of pressures under revenue through publishers. The newsagent sector is really feeling that as well. Anyone along the point of that process is really feeling it. But overall, it was great to see that publishers seem to be having realistic conversations about what their futures are.
Yes, I think the context of that question was that a lot of the publishers, including the major publishers such as News, reinforced how important print still was to their portfolio. Not the centrepiece, but how important it was still in terms of the brand and in terms of the revenue.
Absolutely, and of course, we are really still to work out a monetisation model, a monetisation model that even comes close to the revenue that they were able to secure through print. Todd, your week, what's been on your radar in our media week?
Well, a couple of things come to mind. I think I think I saw some really interesting stuff this week, and I can't even remember where I saw it. Maybe it was in Neiman Lab regarding the. We looked at 7 of the major US publishers and their native plays and what they're seeing in terms of direct to client sales. So this certainly a new era for a lot of organizations going not even through agency at all, but their direct content teams or content products doing this integrated content and traditional, not even traditional, but skyscraper or more complex sort of parallax ad units and things. So I think there's it's refreshing to see the talk around that innovation, and as much as things still look the same old way in many cases, there's it's a renewed focus on how do we actually make this thing work in a new environment and tell stories in a more compelling way. So it's really that blending that data and platform and storytelling, which is I find fascinating. From a personal perspective, I think I had a great conversation this week. In fact, it was quite a lengthy meeting where we were really diving into with an organization, this intersection between traditional, let's imagine content marketing, the techniques applied to, like we often do, to the marketing audience, but in many organizations, just as just as likely to have the same challenges in its PR and comms team, in the way it communicates with shareholders, in the way it communicates with employees. And we're seeing more and more of these companies really applying the same tactics across the board, and are in these early stages of a much more sophisticated way of thinking about a single brand, rather than, well, we've got 5 different audiences and 5 different teams from totally different parts of the company trying to deal with those things. As a consumer, we know no one cares, right? If you have a problem with a brand, you're going to tweet them and say, you suck, regardless of whether or not that was, someone not giving you good service on a plane, or not giving you a job interview when you thought you deserved one. So it's a really interesting thing, and I think that's going to be a very exciting couple of years.
Never a dull day in our media and advertising and marketing world, that's for sure. For me this week, some of the big issues that sort of caught my eye: Apple launching their new reader, their new news app. Certainly that's going to be interesting again to see how that one plays out. YouTube are now going down the subscription model path, very interesting. And indeed, in our own market, we're starting to see those chess pieces of the mainstream media landscape being moved around very strategically. We saw Foxtel take an increased stake in Channel 10, I think, and we saw Win TV take an increased stake in Nine Entertainment. Now, all of this, of course, starting to happen because changes in media reform may or may not be imminent. Who knows? But again, you've got to get it past that. Any reform that's spoken about, you've got to get it past a very complex, very complicated, very diverse Senate. So that's going to be very interesting to watch. And whatever happens there will have an impact on all of us in one way or another. Next week for me, a bit of a quiet week, catching up on some news, catching up on a bit of MediaScope work. But looking forward to the week ahead. And Bobbi, for you next week, anything particular that you'll be doing?
Yes, considering I've just come down from the Himalayas, I've got a bit of catch up to do.
It's going to be to join us from the Himalayas. Very.
There was a slightly hysterical giggle there, Bobbi.
You've still got that thin air happening, maybe. That's right. Todd, for you, the week ahead?
I am here next week, and we are doing we recently were acquired by Accenture, and we are deep in integration and working out what that means for everyone, and it's very exciting. A lot of product innovation, so bringing together insights, looking at how that sort of a lot of that online and real-time sort of analysis can integrate with our strategy offering, and ideation around what that can mean for clients. So, yeah, doing some really interesting work and some interesting pilot work. So, that's kind of what my week is.
Well done. Well, thank you both so much for joining me. I'll just kind of move aside a little so you can see my props this week. I have a book by my friend Darren Woolley, the published brochure, just to say thank you again for having me to the focal attractions in the Mumbrella crew this week. And UnLtd, of course, our industry charity. Next week on the Blab, I believe we'll be talking about digital media, which is another sector. Of course, it is, the only constant in our industry is change, and I don't think that's felt any more than in the digital media sector. But I'll be talking about that through the week. So keep an eye on MediaScope's newsletter, keep an eye on our Twitter. But Todd, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon.
Pleasure. Only partially, but the time I did spend was wonderful.
I'm so glad that you persisted and that you came back in. Thank you so much. Your insights have been absolutely wonderful. And I will email you afterward to get a link to that Neiman Lab article that you mentioned, so I can MediaScope. Okay. And yeah, thank you so much. It's good of you to get involved. Bobbi, thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you both again soon. I think we just kind of pop out now.
Okay.
This was Sorry?
It's been fun. Thank you for having us.
It has been fun. I think we've got covered some good stuff. I'll be putting the video to this up on the MediaScope site. Have a good weekend, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Stay zen, Bobbi.
Bye. I'm going to log you out. Bye.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye, Bobbi. Thanks, everyone, for joining us.